Stopping advanced threats requires knowing exactly what you're up against. ExtraHop Reveal X is the only solution that shows you not just where intruders are going, but where they've been. 90-day look-back and complete network visibility across the data center, cloud, and device edge helps security teams respond 84% faster with ExtraHop Reveal X network detection and response. Explore the interactive demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. When it comes to web app and API security, the choice is simple. You can choose Fastly's security solution that teams will actually use in full blocking mode, just like 90% of their customers. Or you can stick with costly options that you probably just turn off. You can get Fastly's all-in-one platform that protects apps everywhere they live, however they're built. Or departments can agree to disagree. You can go to securityweekly.com/Fastly to learn more. Or you can just wish you had. Today's connected world leaves no room for errors. Neustar reliably secures those connections. Neustar's cloud solutions, which include web application security, DDoS protection, DNS services, IP geolocation, and threat intelligence, ensure network availability across the globe. With over 20 years of award-winning security experience, Neustar proudly enables and protects digital assets of some of the world's largest enterprises. Find out how your company can benefit from the power of Neustar's trusted connection by visiting securityweekly.com/Neustar. Secure your world with Neustar. Always on, ultra secure. Welcome back to the RSA Conference 2021, live from Virtual Broadcast Alley. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. Joining me for this segment is Mario Vucsin, the CEO and co-founder of ReversingLabs. The topic today is Malware Labs, the key to the next generation of threat hunting. You can, of course, find out more by visiting securityweekly.com/ReversingLabs. Mario, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, nice to chat with you again. I've been looking over some of the notes, and I'm told in good RSA fashion that you have a new solution that you're announcing called ReversingLabs Malware Lab Solution. Tell me about that.
Absolutely. So we are announcing really an integrated solution that would include, many different parts, of ReversingLabs platform, and with a singular goal of helping organizations avoid the need to build out too many components, of their own, or integrate too many sort of the specialized, sometimes even open source or even commercial solution into something that, ends up taking a lot of time to maintain, stand up, and something that actually, frankly, keeps SOCs and analysts, away from doing, what they need to do. At the same time, we want this solution to help them be ready to analyze whatever things, come their way, especially in this sort of modern times when we are still very much focused on malware, phishing attacks, etc., but are increasingly focused on the activities of a handful of APT actors, supply chain vulnerabilities, and the such.
Yeah, it seems like, Mario, we're just inundated with threat feeds and technical write-ups of, hey, this is how this malware group operates, and here's how their tools and tactics and techniques, here's how they work, and there's a million articles, and you could spend a lot of time aggregating this data, researching this data. What I like about ReversingLabs is you folks have a great history behind having one-stop shopping for like a really great source for that information. It sounds like that's coming together in this new solution.
Yes, I'd probably say that, there are really obviously a lot of great companies with lots of, great research, and one can spend, entire day, every day, or maybe even longer, just, keeping up, with, what's happening in the market. What we really see is that, we almost have to get back to the square zero. Why do we have intelligence programs, both threat intel and, IR inside of the organization? What is their sort of mission? And what we would like our teams to do. So we all have built expensive infrastructure that provide visibility. Maybe we haven't done so well on the enrichment, but the point of sort of deploying different control mechanisms, sort of security solutions that provide protection different levels, was not just to set and forget it. We've learned a long time ago that it doesn't work. And so with the consumption of, logs, alerts, pushing things into SIM-like databases, we have realized that, it is really critical to be able to audit and, control and further analyze those alerts that come from different products. Now, since they're usually, one truth, coming our way, properly enriching the content, providing secondary analysis and validation of that data, and then obviously providing some level of historic storage on the data through, data lakes, or for files, through sort of, the storage, cabinets, for malicious content, something you don't want in your environment anywhere. Anyway, really provides that the final validation. Did our control mechanisms do the right job? Do we need to override them? Do we need to generate subsequent processes that either bump certain users from the network or modify firewall rules, or provide some other kind of the activity. And so this is something that we don't see enough organizations doing. Given that it's a really rather new space. There are many different tools, both commercial and open source, that organizations need to put together. And so what we see is organizations spending a lot of time in building rather than using.
Right.
And whenever analysts needs to spend time on IT tasks or maintenance tasks, it is really risky for organizations should they leave. But they're really not doing what they should be doing, and that's the analysis of those exceptional events that need human validation.
So it sounds like Malware Labs is taking that, enriching that data for me, and having me spend less time making that actionable for my environment, right? Because at the end of the day, we have to take an action. It's one thing to get an alert and go like, hey, this malware is doing X, Y, Z. It's like, okay, great. Let me go spend a half a day or a day and go see if I have that in my environment. I want to cut right to this is the action you need to take.
Absolutely. And so the key here is to really provide something that's commercially supported, that's integrated into everything that you need. So easy access to data, whether it's from the network, email, storage, or if it's what's really popular these days, if it's some kind of a supply chain application. I want to give you something very, very large. I really don't want to be spending hours of cutting and preparing the data for some analysis. It just needs to go. But also the analysis really needs to have the best possible tooling. Historically, security industry was built on a lot of sort of open source projects, and as it happens, open source has a really bad history of being supported over longer periods of time, especially if the tools are of a highly specific nature.
Yeah.
So getting the best possible parsers, extractors, validators is not trivial. And so if you see some of the larger teams that have pursued sort of build their own infrastructure, hundreds of components, and sort of becomes a massive task to just get them to actual working state before you even start thinking about what data I'm extracting, how am I doing the hunting, what references can I put against it, and even more importantly, how do I generate this data into something that will alert me when something changes and the data needs to be reanalyzed. So type of the questions that auditors and regulators ask of teams traditionally.
So how do I utilize Malware Labs? What are the integration points that I have to get this nicely enriched data and make it actionable in my environment? ReversingLabs team provides multiple easy to configure connectors. So whether that's to other security solutions or to standard interfaces for consuming web or email content or simply mount points for different storage points you name it, S3, SMB, NFS. So it's a very easy way to get data, be it IOCs or actual files, for analysis. And that's sort of the beauty is that there is a sort of one centralized workflow to provide the best of the breed
advanced static analysis on content, combined with dynamic analysis and enrichment, of the network indicators for all sorts of different automation needs, but more importantly, to provide something for that sort of multi-stage tiering triage system. And then of course once we get to actually somebody that needs to spend time on an event, the idea is to have already collected data, ruled out false positives, provided multiple levels of analysis, and then integrated sort of advanced methodologies, sort of like advanced searches through anything the organization is seeing locally, plus anything that ReversingLabs globally has collected. And I should mention here that ReversingLabs has the sort of globally largest repository of especially file-based threat reputation data, so that hybrid searching mechanisms become super interesting. And then of course one can superimpose that with custom search mechanisms using Yara on a sort of historic basis, historic collections either that are being held by ReversingLabs in our cloud, or that organization has collected locally within that integrated ReversingLabs solution.
So it sounds like I can have any number of different solutions to, for example, collect logs and use the ReversingLabs Malware Lab solution to help me discover what might have happened in my environment, even in an early stage of an attack. Correct?
Correct. So, you run into a URL, we will grab the content, from URL. And then, based on, sort of, your policy or what should happen next, we may decide, whether something needs to be detonated. Of course, since, historically ReversingLabs has been providing phenomenal static analysis technology, we do analyze all the payloads, really rapidly. All the way up to providing functional similarity to other known, components, to providing static behaviors or indicators of malicious intent, without needing to launch the application, so that analysts can really decide at what point, when and how something may need to be dynamically detonated. And this sort of, integrated automation with sort of, other kind of aspects of threat hunting is something that usually takes, a long time, to pick and put together.
Yeah. Time is of the essence now, too, especially when we think of ransomware, for example, that I want to find the attack in the earliest stage as I can. And I might not be able to prevent it, right? Because we all know you can't prevent 100% of what's coming at you.
Correct.
But if I have this nice set of data that's coming at me that allows me to catch it in the early stages and do something about it, I feel like that's one of the gaps that we have today in cybersecurity. So we're not catching stuff early enough, right? We don't find out about it until we get a ransom note.
Right.
Way too
Also,
late.
there's a couple of aspects here. So, speaking of ransomware, so it could be something that your endpoint either solution has well detected. So, but from a typical SOC process, this is also a very interesting thing. So, like if something was actually blocked, it should start as an investigation point. Do we have other aspects of this attack or actors activity in our network that we should worry about, and the entire threat hunting process begins. So context and more data becomes absolutely essential, so that we could say, hey, somebody tried to attack us, things were blocked, we did the further inspection, we're good to go. Effectively, we organizations would expect that happens all the time, but in reality, it happens, very rarely. The second sort of, corollary to that is, well, we maybe have blocked it, but we didn't get a lot of information. We don't even know that we had a ransomware attack that was blocked. God forbid it was actually successful. And then, we didn't have, proper alert, but, a handful of, hints, what was happening. So in those cases, we definitely want to have as much data that's available, and rich data that could be stored and made available to those advanced analysts to be able to make sense of what's in front of them.
Yeah, I think that really helps with priority too, because as we've seen, there are different threat actors out there that are operating in different stages of the attack. And knowing that, hey, if you see this, that's an earlier stage, and it usually leads to this. It sounds like you can answer some of those questions for me. So, I may have 3 different early stage attacks that I'm dealing with, but that one usually leads to this really potent, ransomware. So I got to pay attention to that one. Is that kind of some of the questions I can answer?
Correct. And the point is really to connect, as many links, between the indicators. So, network activity to payloads that generate more payloads. You may want to be scanning the endpoint device, and trying to make sense, of all the encrypted data. What was encrypted, what was not encrypted. Can be identified, the ransomware family based on the output, of their encryption, etc. There's a lot of sort of, interesting indicators or metadata that could be obtained, through using all sorts of other tools. But ReversingLabs, they, brings it all together under one commercially supported umbrella. Mind you, we do maintain and rewrite all the sort of different parsers and extractors for formats because we want to be that source that is always up to date for our users, and of course being up to date really means knowing that that we have provided the best possible analysis for our customers.
It sounds like it really benefits threat hunting as well, rather than the threat hunters trying to parse together, 12 different feeds and sources of information. They can get a lot just from ReversingLabs and have a standard data set, right? Because you end up writing like a parser for this feed, a parser for this set of data, right? But when it comes in one, it's much easier.
Correct. I mean, just these simple things that, a lot of threat hunters utilize Yara Rules, and then they start writing the patterns for different, file formats. And they definitely do not have time to do the proper testing on whether those rules are right when they're loose and generate false positives, etc. A lot of these things ReversingLabs provides as a well thought out well tested capabilities that just provide the metadata on which you can rely on, and then effectively after that a user can target how Yara rules are written and can utilize ReversingLabs metadata along with match regard results from Yara hunting to provide that sort of targeted threat hunting process, which we do not see anywhere else. We don't really see any other a solution that can marry in a search expression Yara rule match, with 500 plus different, the keywords that an advanced search through large volumes of data could require.
Do you provide the Yara rules in your feeds?
So ReversingLabs, has a lot of Yara rules, as a part of the product. We also have a really interesting open source collection of Yara rules, high quality Yara rules, no cost to users. And we've been sort of slowly updating them with new threats. And one thing we can say is that the community can definitely rely on those rules. They've been well tested. Utilizing our really massive repository of data, and are sort of very happy to see that the rules have been picked up for many different solutions today. But ReversingLabs has a lot more other content in addition of providing the tools for our customers to add their own custom Yara rules in many different ways. Adding classification, sort of custom rules, custom tags to it, and allowing customers to apply these rules against any extracted object that the payload may have embedded within. Which in this day time and in this time, if you apply this to something like searching through supply chain type of payloads, where usually packages are at 1-5 gigs in size, then this kind of integrated capability becomes really essential to be able to provide a proper threat hunting capability.
How does it also affect the operations too, right? Because threat hunting, while it is part of operations, right, I find that the hunting piece is different from the defending and more proactive pieces. How can it help in the proactive sense? Does it integrate with my SOAR platform, in other words, to help that average everyday stuff just kind of give me some breathing room?
So absolutely. So all the major, we have integration with literally all the major, SOAR platforms, for kind of the, workflowing. We will, help organizations stitch it into whatever the workflow process, they have in their organization. But, when you were talking about, operations, you're talking about, teams that have, very wide purview over what's happening. They need to worry about networks. They need to worry about, custom applications that, organization has built. They need to worry about, email. They need to worry about the endpoint. Mention again, now, they have to worry about software that they're deploying, the patches that are being deployed, software the company is planning to buy in the future, the containers and VMs that are maybe going into the cloud. Obviously since the COVID, a lot of organizations have greatly improved, their mobile and web applications to all of a sudden start, taking a lot of rich content, from images, to media, from images, to documents, and all of that is providing a very large operational burden that first needs to be sorted out, and data pulled out in a structured form and deposited into the database of your choice, be it Elastic, or Splunk, and ReversingLabs supports them and has other abilities to integrate with whatever the repository of choice organization has.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've got lots of great hooks and integrations to help both operations and threat hunters make sense of the data they have to find what's important that needs attention.
Yeah, that's correct.
Mario, thank you so much for appearing on Security Weekly.
Oh, thank you so much, for inviting me, and looking forward to speaking with you again.
Outstanding. For those that want to learn more, especially about the new Malware Lab product from Reversing Labs, you can visit securityweekly.com/ReversingLabs. Welcome back to RSA Conference 2021, live from the virtual broadcast alley. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. Joining me for this micro interview is RICARD Carlson, the co-founder and CEO of Detectify. We'll be talking today about why you should challenge shift-left testing to create a better and safer application. We're, of course, sponsored in this segment by Detectify, and you can learn more by visiting securityweekly.com/Detectify. RICARD, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you here. So I want to hear about this challenge of shifting left, because we always hear the phrase shifting left like a lot when we talk about application security. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
I mean, the base concept is when development processes collapse. If you think about a modern organization where you have fully integrated domain-driven teams that operates in a DevOps capacity, what are you then going to shift left into? Because I guess the shift left concept comes from when you were a big enterprise and you had maybe QA testing, security review, and you have 5 different gates to push a software into production. But in the modern world where the same team evaluates, tests, and ships and controls production environments for their small segment of a product, what is then to shift left into?
Yeah, there's certainly, so many different points in the software development lifecycle and the software chain, right, to inject security. And I think sometimes we focus too heavily on making sure the developer writes perfect code, and we all know that's not going to happen.
No. And I think the whole thing is about how do you enable the team to use the right tool at the right point in time. I mean, a static tool works best in some setups. A dynamic tool works best in some setup. A library type of testing tool works in some setups. And those are all types of tools that you might want to give to your developers. But talking about shift left, then that I think it means that you still keep this old like waterfall development process that I think most organizations are trying to get away from.
Yeah, it's interesting in the way you describe that. It seems like if we shift our security focus left, it puts more work and responsibility on the developer to spend more time in the code, and we can kind of almost reverse back to waterfall where they're spending too much time coding, where they should push it out and allow the rest of the process that is flowing right to identify those security vulnerabilities, but then inform the developer. Did I capture that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the whole idea, because when a team runs security testing, and if that testing is then controlled by some central team, it's going to go from central review, and then everything needs to go through the same funnel and process, and then it takes a week to get back to the security team because someone needs to look at it, and you have halted operations. That doesn't work, because I mean, everybody wants to be able that the team should be able to ship code immediately and instantly, but then they need also to be able to test both their libraries and dependencies, their static code, but also their dynamic testing at instantly, both in, maybe for example, the staging environment, but also in the live production environment, because the same thing, staging and production is not the same thing. Mm-hmm. So you need to be able to then to run all the tests, the right test at the right point in time. That's, I guess, what we're talking about, trying to challenge. So I think just the notion of shift left means that you're still stuck in a waterfall process. I mean, I think DevOpsSec is a much more relevant term to use for modern security.
Also, I also feel like when you shift that testing right, that you can have a better understanding of the priority than you would if I'm sitting in a source code, editor in an IDE, and it's telling me that I could be introducing a security bug. There's so many unknowns at that point. I don't think you get to a certain point in the right side of development where if you're scanning in production, as you say, you can say, this is going to be a huge issue in production from a security perspective. All these other things, maybe not, and flow that back into the developers. So they're fixing the right bugs that have the highest priority, which that's also a benefit.
Yeah, because something that is, a high critical, that is high in staging, might not be high critical in production. And I think that's the whole concept that we talk to many organizations that says, oh, we need to make sure that the software is bug-free before we push it to production. I don't know if that is the best way to secure an organization. I think the best way is to make sure that you're able to fast fix something that you encounter. I don't say that you should ship shitty code, but to focus, trying to push out, so to say, completely error-free products, I think that won't really work, because also what you push today with new bugs and new vulnerabilities being, researched and identified every day, it means rather that you need to be able to update and run the processes fast, rather than to find things maybe in the earliest way.
Yeah, and that has two benefits to the business. One, I'm shipping product much faster, and two, I'm finding probably not just bugs, but also security fixes much faster. And then if I tune my processes that notify developers quickly, I think that's the key, and enable them to fix them. Do you have tips for, kind of that information flow from, finding a bug in production and getting it to the right developer?
I think the critical thing here is I sometimes see that there is a balance here, because you also need to have almost organizations are afraid because you don't want to give developers too much noise. So sometimes they need to, wash. You want to wash results or clean them before you hand them over to the developer, because otherwise you will overload them with information. But that goes then that you would see that they would see security as something that is negative. I think one of the benefits here is that they need to see security as part of their daily job, and something that is equally important as shipping features, that security is a natural part of it. I think that's one thing. The second thing is that you need to give them direct access to the information, because it needs to be in the tools and in the information that they are using. For a static code analyzer, then it's easier. Then, of course, the information should come directly in the IDE. But for maybe then a dynamic tool, then it needs to come through the tools that people are using. If it's Slack or OpsGenie, or if it's directly into Jira or whatever they are using, that's the way the information needs to go. to give people then access to the information they need to resolve the issues.
Yeah, and I like being able to prioritize that in Jira as well. I like to use Jira to archive everything, but focus developers on certain tags. Like the DAS found a security bug or vulnerability in the production system. That should carry with it a tag that gets the developer's attention. And yet, it might have found 10 other things, but don't worry about those right now.
No. I mean, we have one organization that we work with that I think we have made it in a fairly interesting way. I think they have 500 or 600 engineers or developers. Everyone have access to all the information and all the vulnerabilities for all teams. However, they get routed automatically, the information is relevant for their team. And if they don't have acted on it and resolved it, I think it in a set of, a week, then a central security operations team gets notified, and then they reach out and say, hey, why haven't you resolved this? And supporting them and giving them help. But the base here is that they give the information available and make it accessible for everyone.
Yeah, and I also like that strategy because as a developer, if I'm going to go fix a bug or a security vulnerability, and I know the code pretty well, maybe it's my section of code, I want to know about like all the other things in there because I want to fix some of those too, right? I just don't want to get like one bug and go, okay, I'm going to go fix that, and then have it automatically regression tested, and then go, I got to go back in that same section of code and maybe fix a different bug. Like I want to try and group those together. I think that's a much better strategy, even though it kind of fights the DevOps moving faster. I think there's a balance in like fix all the stuff. We're going to be in this code, like fix as much stuff as you can, right?
And it challenges the basic, the old security print, the rules of least privileged access, because and I think that's the base for compliance. But maybe in the future we need to challenge how much information is least privileged access. Maybe we actually need to raise that bar and don't be so afraid of sharing information with the internal team. Because I have organizations I speak to that say, no, we cannot give the developers access to the vulnerabilities in larger scale because they might use it against us because we don't trust them. Mm. Okay, so the people that are actually pushing code, you want them to move fast, but you don't trust them. Then there is something that how you set up your system, I think, that is maybe not that healthy.
Yeah, I like the information sharing concept RICARD a lot because I think in the end of the day it helps the developer and different strokes for different folks too. You may not want to overwhelm your junior developers, right? And you have to tune to your audience accordingly. But restricting all the information doesn't allow people to grow either, right? Maybe as a junior developer, hey, I want to go look at all these vulnerabilities and try and understand them and then apply them. It might take me a little longer, but they're going to have to learn it at some point, and hiding information is not helping them.
Because, the main challenge, if you follow up on that, the main challenge in most organizations, everybody talks about, there's 1.5 million cybersecurity professionals lacking in the world, and it grows for every day, and so on. But the whole, if you want people to learn, you need to give them access to the information they need to look and thrive, because that's when they will be great at things.
Absolutely. And it's interesting too, I've done a couple of interviews about some security research teams that are just pouring through code and finding vulnerabilities. Is that something we can teach to developers, or do you recommend that there are people on the team that are really just looking at the code and looking for vulnerabilities, or can some of that also be automated, and how do you strike the balance?
My experience is when Detectify, we work with a fairly big group of different security researchers externally as well that we source vulnerabilities through our tools. Many of the best people supporting things there are actually working as developers by day and then security researchers by night. Because if you from the outside knows how a system behaves, and when you're building things during the day, you guys, here I messed up. Wonder if other people also have messed up in the same way as I did today. And then you try it out and see if you can exploit it. And I think that is where the many interested and highly capable engineers and developers, they will thrive as security people just if you give them the responsibility and give them also maybe the accountability to do it.
Mm. And should they also be in the agile kind of spirit, writing tests for those in their own QA cycle, or do you see some of those tests also being in some of the DAS scanning? Like, where do you put your test, I guess, once you've done some of that analysis internally?
Yeah, I think that's the difference. I guess most tools does not allow for people to write and configure tests. We just released a new way, actually, with Detectify. We released a tool that's partially open, that's open sourced from our internal things that we call the Ugly Duckling. And that is like a minimized version of our internal scanners, but that supports the same type of JSON format that we use internally, that you could run and specify and build tests. And I mean, I don't say it's not unlikely that also those tests will be able to, that you will be able to import them in the future into Detectify as well. So we want people, that you should be able to, run tests and build things locally. But then if you need scale and automation, then you should use maybe a provider to do that.
Right. In your results too, how deep you're going with the feedback back to developers? Is it like proof that it was exploited, or is it tips on how to fix it? Like how much is included in there today?
Yeah. In our tool, Detectify, 99% of our tests are payload based, and then the developer gets and we're able to see the payloads and everything that we ran, because we don't do signature based testing because that creates too much noise and too much false positives. So we only do what we call payload based testing, or that we are able to have a fully weaponized payload on. Otherwise, we won't run the tests.
And how when people use Detectify in the kind of software chain process, how do you iterate quickly, right, and scan that stuff quickly? I think people still have the perception that, it's a web app scanner, it's going to take a really long time, right? Yeah. I think vendors such as yourselves have really worked to improve that, knowing that we're moving fast.
I mean, a DAS tool, and that's always the comments on dynamic scanners, because they are slightly slower. And then and it should not be part of like a break build process. But what I'm moving towards is, many organizations are maybe doing external testing of their production environment once per quarter. Wow. If you just, as a first step, move that to once per week, and that the developer team gets direct access to the results, I think you have moved yourself taking a big step. Instead of, and then next step is maybe that you do it on triggers based on build systems and similar. But the status today is that many people are still stuck at it's done by the central security team and it's done once per quarter or once per month because of some shitty compliance standards tells you to do it that frequently. But just moving it to a weekly testing and giving the people direct access to it, then you have taken quite a few steps to moving to a much more agile way of testing.
Yeah, and I like that because you're reducing your technical debt in that case. If you wait till once a month or once a quarter, you've written so much code that now the fixing it is harder. I find it easier to fix as you go and reduce that technical debt because you've written less lines of code before you've fixed that. In some of the large open source projects have gotten into trouble. It's not necessarily their fault. I mean, their projects date back sometimes to the 90s. They're still writing code in the same project today. So just, overcoming that technical debt is huge. If you're in an enterprise today developing applications, I think you have tools available like Detectify to help you with that problem.
Yeah, I mean, we have some customers, unfortunately, they say, this is a medium-sized bug and it will be implemented and resolved in 90 days. That's when I get scared.
Yeah. That's too long. Too much stuff changes. I mean, you're writing, like if you've got a bug in a central function or library, and now you're writing more and more code that relies on that, now you're just constantly incrementing the amount of time it takes to fix that bug.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that you have an open source tool that people can use in their development processes to more quickly find bugs and do testing. Is there any other features that you want to talk about, RICARD?
I mean, I think that's not. I don't think it's something big. It was something that we thought was fun to do, and we released it because it was mainly targeting our crowdsource community. Because we have this group of about a few hundred freelance hackers that when they find new attack patterns and general things, they send us these, so to say, proof of concepts and payloads, and we build them into the scanner. And it takes us, when we're really fast, it takes about 15 minutes from submission to when it's live in our environment. And to even further speed up that process, we say, hey, let's give the freelance hackers or our crowd community this engine that is compatible with our internal formats. But then we don't know if it's going to be used more by others or not. We have put it out as a small test.
Yeah.
To see how we can work with, because I think we talk often a way of collaboration rules. We want to collaborate with the world outside of our company, both with customers and the hackers and so on, to build an environment that can, funnel information and, vulnerabilities in the right directions. And we would like them to be able to automate the shit out of this in the center.
Yeah. No, and I really like that approach because web application attacks, the new techniques and variations of techniques come out all the time. And I think crowdsourcing that is absolutely the right approach.
So I think that's the most fun. And then we released this ugly duckling. It's a super small project, but as a first step to see if this is a good way to collaborate even more.
Outstanding. RICARD, thank you so much for coming on Security Weekly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. For folks who want to learn more, make sure you visit securityweekly.com/Detectify.